Hello and welcome to the M&A Science Podcast. This podcast is part of our mission to rethink how M&A is done. The old school seller-led approach, that era is over. Buyer-led M&A is about strategy, alignment, and execution, putting value creation at the center of every deal. If you want to dive deeper into this framework, check out my book, Buyer-Led M&A. It breaks down the entire system we use to plan, integrate, and create value faster. And if you're serious about taking your M&A practice to the next level, join the M&A Science membership. You'll get access to hundreds of frameworks, templates, and practitioner insights, plus AI-powered search to find exactly what you need for your deals. Learn more at mascience.com. I'm your host, Kisan Patel, Chief Scientist at M&A Science. Today, I'm joined by Donara Jaghinyan, a transformation and integration leader at Great Gray Group, a financial services company. Donara's got deep experience in public and private equity-backed environments. She's led diligence, post-close integration, TSA execution, and enterprise system implementations across healthcare, SaaS, professional services, and financial services. She's one of the rare operators who's actually done the work, not just governance on a slide, but real integration, real TSAs, and real change management in the trenches. Today we're going to talk about all things it takes to make a deal truly successful, from integration planning through execution, TSAs, change management, and more. Donara, how are you doing today?
Good, Kisan. Thank you for having me here.
Thanks for making time. We're here at Deal Room's headquarters in Boston, and they appreciate you taking time from doing deals exciting. To have a conversation with me.
Thank you. Thank you for having me here.
Can we kick things off a little bit about your background?
Sure. That's an interesting, a little bit of accident and a strategy, I would say. So you won't see that every day happening. So I started international relations back in Armenia. Study of countries, politics, and negotiations and deals, but yet transitioned that into two companies, deals on the company side, cross-border negotiations. When I moved to Boston, I took over a temporary project with the PMI Central Massachusetts Project Management Institute. They were transitioning their email system, and they were fully going into Google Suite, and I helped them do their email migration. And that was the early seeds of that's something interesting, and I'm interested in learning more. So when I started looking at the jobs in the US market, I was primarily focused into the deal side, mergers, and I happened to be right place, right time, Boston, where early 2021, Harvard Pilgrim and Taft Health Plan merged, and I joined their IMO, and since then I've been just living and breathing with M&A.
That's really interesting background, because you started with the international relationships, got into international business aspect, got exposed to one component of integration. Mm-hmm. Now you're basically doing it full time.
Yes.
And you did it since you came to Boston. So how long have you been here for?
6 years now.
So you lived in Armenia previously, before then?
Yes, indeed.
Wow, this is awesome. What kind of industries have you worked across? So it sounds like you had a few different roles related to integration.
Yeah. I think doing M&A is one of the fields that you don't really have to be a subject matter expert. You don't have to have a niche financial background or technology. I started, as I said, in the healthcare insurance, one of the largest New England healthcare insurance firms, transitioned to technology software, where part of it was also providing professional services. Then transitioned to financial services right now.
You moved around. What's
Yes.
What's something you wish you understood before running your first major integration?
So many things. Dependencies are very important. Just something that seems like, oh, it's just a ERP integration, or it's just like integrating systems or people's. There's so many levels underneath, and also the people dynamics. Sometimes functional leads are handling only their aspects, but as a IMO, you are tasked to help them understand the dependencies, upstream and downstream. So knowing how to navigate leadership conversations and like give them the look ahead of like, there is a reason why we are integrating. There's a reason why we are integrating at this timeline, at this pace, as similar items.
How would you describe the role of an IMO?
Trusted partner with the key experience or a background in multiple deals. It is hard to say that one deal is similar to another, but you have to have seen multiple scenarios, multiple things going wrong, and you have to advise them. It's not just like integrate systems. It's not just like bring in payroll. There are so many components, and you being in the center, you have to help them understand multiple pillars down to one activity that is happening. So advisory role, I guess, if that's the right way to say, advise and help them understand that it's not just integration, it's the entire holistic system of the company that you are building.
Why can't I just hire a PM for my company and tell them you're now an IMO and I want you to run this next integration?
That's a good question. You can definitely do that, but usually PMs are project specific, work stream specific, right? And I work directly with HR PM in the finance or IT side, but they truly oversee just their scope of integration. But IMO sits above, where we see holistically how it's going to impact. It's not just bring in Workday or HRIS system. It's how do you set up the GL code in ERPs? How do you set up the IT integration? How do you run all the emails, so on and so forth? But not all PMs or function leads know that. It's the cross-functional aspect in it.
Like real program level management.
Indeed.
And then I take it some of this is seen this movie before, kind of know what's going to happen, which is important. Can we talk about carve-outs? You did a carve-out of I think like multiple business units. What's like what gets underestimated when you do a carve-out?
Timelines can drive that dependency, but sometimes you just have to do it to close the deal. But there's always so much dependency with the parent company, like because it was part of the big enterprise or big structure that no one really documented the separation. No one really separated the systems or the people or the payroll. And then you have to carve it out. You document it enough for the carve-out, but most of the cases, when you start the carve-out or the actual deal happens, you see the interrelation with the central org or the parent organization.
So my experience, you did a $100 million carve-out. I'm doing a tail end of a carve-out, 3 people. The M&A Science podcast, we're carving out of deal room. And now I feel the pain. I would say my big 3 are scope. You think you scoped everything, but you didn't. So and that I'm very fortunate. We have a good relationship and on the sides of deals here. But if you didn't, that's a lot of things that you didn't plan on that you have to negotiate and figure out.
Right.
2, all the vendors. Like you have to set up all those vendors, and some of them don't want to play nice, and you got to negotiate hard with them or find new vendors. And then the people stuff, because you end up with some gaps. So you got to like scramble to go hire people. And then sometimes you don't hire the right person. You got to let them go and go hire somebody else.
Yeah.
So that was my big 3. The one I'm curious about, well, one, if you have anything on that, because I feel like if that's fundamental. The other one I think I got lucky on was it didn't have a big lift on TSAs.
Okay.
And because everything was like a sort of arm's length
Standalone.
distance of a business. Yeah. I mean, it was just more of an outlines of how we're going to do it. But so what is, like how does it really go down when you work on a bigger carve out?
It's a combination. Again, like how much do you have time to scope it out? But to your point, all the people, the vendor aspect and the scope, it's carve out is divestiture of setting up a new business. Look at it. So you do have to have the IT, you have to have security, you have to have payroll, you have to have benefits. So it's like setting up a new company from scratch. And when you don't have the time to set that up, that's where the TSAs come into play. But TSAs don't look at the TSAs as like contracts, look at it as a project because they have like a start, they have scope, and they have a finish timeline. So if you don't have enough time to set up the payroll, which is one of the important things that employees care, you have to ask the seller of like, hey, for another month or two, continue processing, then we'll do the invoicing to make sure the employees get paid until you set it up. But if you have enough time to set up a new payroll provider, get their onboarding and like all the items, then you don't really have to go through a TSA on that. So TSAs are typical for the carve-outs, but not all carve-outs have TSAs.
If you've ever run diligence, you know the chaos. Seller documents dumped into the data room, mislabeled, scattered everywhere. Your team wastes days just finding the right files, then more days manually reading through hundreds of contracts looking for risks. That's why we enhanced Dealroom AI with two new assistants, AI Document Organizer and AI Document Intelligence. AI Document Organizer automatically sorts every document into the right folder the moment it's uploaded, which means no more file wrangling. And AI Document Intelligence reads every file instantly, extracting key terms, obligations, and red flags so you spot risks early instead of weeks into diligence when it's too late. The result? Faster diligence, earlier risk detection, and more confident decisions. Learn more at dealroom.net/AI. That's dealroom.net/AI. And so you can do it without carve-outs. I mean,
yeah,
you can do a carve-out and not necessarily have to have TSAs, but sounds like they're there pretty often.
There are. Yes. The example that we had there, two business units coming to technology firm, and it was combination of people, HR TSAs, it was finance TSAs, technology TSAs. An interesting component of it was you think you are looking at them just on the functional level, but some of the TSAs had their dependencies on the other TSAs. You had to set up the technology environment to be able to close the HR TSA, let's assume, or you have to integrate some systems to make sure you onboard and hire new people, and then you exit the TSA. So, and that interesting aspect, what I've seen in the carve-out is going back to your scoping. You feel like you are scoping, but not until you have the model outlined. That's where you start, the scoping has been done, but is it really, let's say, apples to our operating model? And then you identify that it's not, and then you start extending the TSAs to just build up your infrastructure to be able to support that.
So it's like a tool to fill in the gaps.
Yes, you can look at that.
Can you walk me through this carve-out that you're discussing? Because you worked on how many carve-outs?
Two.
So two different carve-outs?
Two separate business units, part of one deal, if you look at that.
Do they go to the same
company?
Yeah.
Yes. Same buyer.
So same buyer bought two different business units that were carved out. I'd love to hear just what's the story? Like how did it go down? What was the timeline of events that happened? And then what was the good and bad?
It was the driving force for my previous company where I worked. It was heavy in TSAs. The deal happened in 2022. I joined post-close of the transaction. So I joined to support with the TSA management. It was large. Some of the budget was heavy on the TSA side. So I joined to manage the TSAs, and several months after, the program director left the company, and then I stepped in to support with the TSA management. But that's where you understand that integration drives TSA and not the other way around, where we've been mostly focused on closing the TSAs. But not until, coming back to my point, you set up the right environments through the integration, you will be able to close the TSAs. We had multiple, it was a cross-border deal, multiple locations, multiple entities. Interesting aspect in the TSAs that I noticed was the company structure that we had and what we acquired was very different. So let's assume you have a real estate TSA. It is very centrally managed on the buyer side, but on the seller side, it's very dispersed through different geographics. And then that's where the challenges come in. Who's the roster, the receiver and the seller? You're trying to exit it, but there's so many locations and people don't really know who you are talking about. So that was an interesting component that I saw. But again, tying back to how do you handle the TSAs and integrations at the same time when you have two integrations happening was interesting and challenging to talk to the functional leads and try to explain why you have to do this right now. Why is it important to exit it? And sometimes you see that TSAs are part of the integration budget. And there's the feeling that, yes, the budget allocation is already there, but yet it hits the functional P&L, right? And then not until you start talking numbers, that's when people start, oh, it's actually hitting my functional budget and we have to exit that, versus, oh, we didn't have time to do training, we didn't have time to do the documentation, or hire a new rec. So can we extend? Usually what happens with TSAs is lots of extensions where companies lose time and money.
So it's funny because it sounds like you can know when you're going to need to do some TSAs pretty early and you can get ahead of it. And then you might find out later, like when rubber hits the road or you're about to hit a wall, that you need to get a TSA.
Yes.
And then you're negotiating that. And then you end up extending these TSAs because they're not ready on the other side to take over that service. Does that sound right?
Yeah. I mean, at the carve-out, especially in the big ones, you bring in sometimes systems or people that you don't really have in-house. So, for example, what we had, one of the business units was professional services, right? The way they do their deal generation or revenue recognition is completely different. So we didn't have the headcount or the knowledge to do that. So yes, it comes with the people, but it's the system relationship with the seller organization and seller systems that you are trying to keep up. And then they're like, oh, it's already functioning. It's a TSA. We'll just do it. And there's merging priorities and other M&As happening. So you feel like it's a TSA, but people look at it as contract that you can extend versus you have to look at it's temporary. It doesn't give you new timelines. It actually creates deadlines for you that you have to manage accordingly, because if you miss that, it becomes redundant and creates lots of integration debt on you.
Do you have an example of just how do you negotiate a TSA and keep up with all the different documents and everything?
My example didn't happen on the TSA integration pre-deal close, but I have an example where we had to work with the buyer side, our teams, and the seller side to extend the TSA. And that's where it comes from. Seller side, sure, as long as it's money involved, but my role came in to help the functional leads understand that there is a cost impact, and mostly TSAs are short term. It's 4 to 6 months, maybe maximum a year. But extensions usually have cost impact. There's percentages being added up, and there's like a hard stop sometimes what we've seen. And then another aspect comes who's drafting the contract. Everyone is busy on their workloads, right? And you go into your legal department, you go into the seller side legal department, and then you start bouncing back and forth. Who's going to draft it? But in my experience, couple of the TSAs that we had to extend, we just leveraged the master transaction agreement, and we just referenced to the right clauses. It was just the same scope, timeline extension, and we had good relationship with the seller side. But at some point, you just, okay, extensions cannot just go, And then one process that we had was, it was established right after the deal closed, the extension request and the documentation process. Who's the requester? Who's the receiver? How do you document the requests on the extensions? And then how do you also notify the exits of the TSAs, right? Because let's say if your monthly books closing, companies run on different financial cycles, right? And sometimes you can do the financials at the month close or when the transaction was closed. In my example, we were counting the TSAs with the transaction close time. So that was the driver on a monthly basis. So if you do not notify on the right timeline, you accrue cost. So we were closely working with the functional leads on a 30-day notification period, and then just doing the math of, actually, we notified you 15 days ago, so we are going to pay the half of the TSA.
Oh, interesting. So there's a lot of tracking on these.
A lot. It's really heavy on a cost, and for the companies and for the leadership, any cost savings is important. So, and it also is helpful for the functional leads as well to show that they actively worked on it. There are some cost savings on it.
So we got that out of the way. Then you got sort of the harder part is when you do these kind of carve-outs. Let's go to the buy side on, running a typical process. When do you get involved with deals?
Mostly before or around LOI.
Can you walk us through how you structure diligence? And
Sure. So in the companies that I work, usually there is a corp dev part where they bring in at the right time the IMO, but we had the understanding and the partnership with the corporate team that the sooner IMO comes in, the smoother the integration is going to flow. It's not just a deal closed. So
why?
There's so many whys. I'll just lay it out now. But the whole aspect of the deal is not closed yet until it's signed. Everyone knows about it. Legal is very cautious. Corp development is very cautious. But as an integration team, you want to have the right people in the diligence conversations to be able to give you like a tangible integration plans to say, can we fully be integrated within 3 months or 3 years? So it starts top down, given the sensitivity of the deal, especially in the public companies. You don't want to announce it. You don't want any leakage to be happening. So we start with the heads, the executive sponsors, who know well enough the organization to say what needs to be happening. There are some teams where, for example, in HR, the structure that we had, it was separate lead for the HR, for the benefit side, separate leads for the payroll side. And as a functional head, it is hard to commit to a timeline without really consulting the team. So sometimes there are scenarios where we would go to the legal and corp dev and justify the cases like, we truly need this additional 2-3 people to come in to make informed decisions. So we just expend enough to have the right people ask the right questions for the integration. That's where it's come in. It happened on both sides where we would set up environments for the functional heads to speak to the seller side, or sometimes route the questions through IMO or corporate development. At the previous company, we got to the level where we got so structured that we had playbooks, multiple types and sizes, and we would just refine on what would be your top 5 questions, what would be high to low, medium low.
I was going to ask because, okay, so biggest goal is just do good planning at the end of the day. You want to get in early, better planning, you have a better understanding of how things are going to get executed, timelines, everything. How do you manage and orchestrate it? Because you're essentially trying to get more people involved earlier to do the planning.
Of course.
And then I see this a lot with large companies where they're working in silos and you get a lot of redundancy in questions. And then it's the typical 50 people trying to buy a 5-person startup type of thing. You know, how do you coordinate that so you're not overwhelmed? And I feel like this process itself is already so taxing for the sell side. It's always underestimated and they get fatigued pretty quick. You know, how do you sort of balance that as well for the sellers so that you're not destroying their mind?
It's really hard. And I've seen that as a mature company where you have multiple people representing, as I said, just one person for payroll, one person for benefits, versus on most of the founder-based companies, it's one person wearing multiple hats, right? Imagine you have to close the deal within 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and you are getting all the flow of the questions. But I've seen the journey, if that's the right word to say, of people who've done M&A function leads on the first deal, second deal, and third, and how they already know what are the important questions to ask. It depends before close and after close. Before close, it's somewhat manageable because you are not really expanding the team yet. It's handful of people who are driving it. And the questions that you ask at that time are not very process specific. It's revenue, customer, contract, deal size. So
these are like things you're already asking in diligence.
Exactly. But during the diligence, we work with the functional heads on what would be your top 5 to 5 questions if you were to ask. But some of the functional heads coming up to my earlier conversations are cross-functional or they have dependency, right? So on the customer side or ERP side or the product in the IP deals, one answer from the seller side can actually feed 2-3 functions. So routing through the IMO is, sure, let's collect the questions, but we help orchestrate the structure, what questions do really get to the buyer.
So you have a role in information management that you can try to disseminate this information so you don't have redundancy of requests to the company.
Of course, it's very important. And I've seen that we just shared this. This is the same file. It's somewhere there.
Are you doing it manually? You got some nice AI tools nowadays that might be able to help with that.
It started manually, lots of Excels, but we started using at the previous company Smartsheet, so trying to centralize for the planning. But for the deal side, some data room tools to be handful for the due diligence documents.
So system of record and then PM tool that gets you through tracking all those questions, and that way you can kind of manage and make sure you're running that, coordinating it so you don't have as much redundancy, and then this sort of allows you to pivot through different stakeholders.
Well, important thing is, Kisan, as well, it's the information that you get, but how you pass it or hand off to the actual people who are going to do the integration, which happens at the close when you know the certainty the deal is going to close or right at the close. That's where most of the information gets lost, or you don't do proper handoff, or you bring in teams midway after a week or two and then you forget that they are just newly being onboarded. But if you make sure it's documented, you make sure it's stored in a system and you give correct access, that's how you eliminate the questions back and forth coming and going. And having a central system like IMO, who is in the center, who's driving, who is knowledgeable enough on the deal structure, on the integration planning activities, that's where you try to navigate and route the questions first through you. And truly, if you don't know something, you try to help your functional leads and go back to the founders. And
So you're trying to bridge the gap, make sure there's no knowledge chasm.
Of course.
For all this information you collect during diligence that can be passed on to the team members that are going to execute integration, because there's a number of people that come in later.
Yes.
In a larger company, I've seen all these different departments end up using so many different tools.
Mm-hmm.
Like, how do you manage that? Do you sort of play nice with all these other tools, or like, no, you're going to have to use whatever it is, Smartsheet or whatever you're using?
It's complicated. So depends on the relationship with the teams. Some people like finance and accounting, they are so heavy in Excels with their formulas and book closing and the numbers. And I had the struggle of showing it's not just because we want to use, let's say, Smartsheet, right, for the project management, because it's centralized. It's easy for the leadership reporting. You can build reports out of it. You can share dashboards with it. Depend on the complexity of the transaction. We at least give a program level, like a PMI plans, or on the individual functional level. There's a consensus built between the teams and IMO, what is the level that we are requiring to be tracked on our visibility? It's the what needs to be done. The how depends on the functions. Sometimes we had functions who would come to IMO and we need day-to-day support on setting up, let's say, email migration for the day one readiness, or ERP. It's very complex. It is cross-functional. But on some back office or heavy accounting or heavy technology works that functions implement themselves to prepare for the integration, we would give them the flexibility to be agile, to organize themselves. At the end of the day, everyone's professional. We treat each other professional, but you come into the reporting for the executive presentations, this is the materials we need, and the how is flexible.
Can we walk through, so in the industry, they always talk about like 30, 60, 90-day plans.
Uh-huh.
Can we walk through like what actually happens? But start with day one, because I feel like day one's always the big deal.
Of course, the deal.
It is. And I feel like day one could probably land different, because some deals they sign, announce, close all in the same day.
Mm-hmm.
And then some they'll announce.
You signed and closed.
And then, I mean, there's there's a lot of different combinations.
Of course.
I guess you just technically can't close. Well, you could close and then announce.
Of course, it happens. There's sometimes there's merging priorities. There's industry events that are happening. There's quarterly announcements.
Seen that where they close and then announce it on like a big event. Okay, let's run through the key milestones of going from day one, and then how does that progress with 30, 60, 90?
Yeah. I think it would be right to start pre-day one. It's not just the day one. There are so many works that is happening to prepare for the day one, day 30, 90, and onwards. Important aspect for the day one readiness is day one controls, that we were heavy on it. So once you close the deal, it's your company, right? And if you don't put some controls on the expenses or code access, it's already your liability, your expenses. So if you close a deal and the founder goes and throws a huge party, that's already yours. So prepare key, I won't say functions, but themes that are very important for day one controls. That's one exercise that as an IMO we would run with our R&D, finance, marketing teams for announcements. So make sure those are ready. For the day one, again, depends on the strategy. You signed and closed. There are some approvals that need to be happening, but day one is mostly town halls, announcements, welcome, like if there is any PR reports that needs to be happening. But making sure at day one key critical items are under your hand. Do you have access to the code? Did you get the right credentials? Do people know how to their management level? Management is very important reporting structure that day one. They have to know who they report to. Sometimes it stays, you don't touch it, but sometimes it's very critical. Day one, you have people need to know where they are coming. And making sure those items are communicated. It can be a bit heavy, but that's where the expand of the teams and actual introductions between the buyer and seller happens. First week and 30 days is the true discovery. Yes, you do this diligence before close, but the true discovery happens when you have access to legally, you have access to the company, right? You can ask questions. Yes, there are sample contracts that I shared, but truly you are not allowed to see any financial details, any customer data up until you are closed. And then that's where the discovery sessions happen. If you don't own the process within 30 days, you won't have the integration be successful within 80, 90, or afterwards. So assuming the diligence information, expanding to the right teams, translating the why we are doing, partnering closely with the deal sponsor, and translating the integration plans that have been established to the actual people who are going to execute that. Depends on the strategy again. Most of the companies want to do the front office integration first. So you target to have all the plans and informations ready for execution within 30 to 60 days on the customer side, bring in the sales force, or back office usually gets the 90 or the 120 days plus. But again, it depends on the strategies that people adopt. I would say 30 days is the discovery, refining your plans, flagging any unknowns that you would have.
Wait, let's pause on this day one for a second, because you got a lot going on in day one. A lot of announcements, town hall meetings that go by. It sounds like you're going to get a lot of access to information that you didn't in diligence, because now that you're fully closed, you got full reign, customer list, everything. So you got that. And then you probably have some tentative plans, but you really want to flush out of, hey, this is what the game plan is for the coming milestones.
Yes.
And then, people sorting them out, who's reporting to what, giving them that clarification about everything that's changing. I'm curious on the onboarding part, because a lot of time these deals are asset sales. Are you just all these employees all onboarded on day one? Like, what does that part look like?
Depends. What do you mean with onboarding?
Because if it's like an asset sale, you're basically hiring all these employees, and is that just conducted on day one? Like, this is all just a mass onboarding of?
Not all day one. It's heavy, but some people are finding out about the deal on the seller side, very close to the transaction being closed, right? So you give some time within a first week to do that. I won't say it's really happening day one. I've seen, in regards to the onboarding, some scenarios you try to bring in the employee experience and teamwork, collaboration, and have day one emails and collaboration tools ready, while also letting them run with theirs. It truly depends on the strategy.
So it's not, you have to do it all out.
No. It will be too heavy for them and too impactful, like right away you close and you take it. So it's iterative approach.
Okay, now let's move to 30 days.
30 days. 30 days is the execution of the first priorities. What do you really have to bring in? Establish the stability. The expectation is by 30 days, you have your preliminary plans finalized. Do they change? Of course. Things happen, priorities shift, but the expectation is by 30 days, you have your integration plans ready and some of the items executed already.
Integration overall can vary, right? You can be hey, we're done in 90 days, we hand it to the business, or sometimes it could be years.
We always look at it as functional integration because it's hard to say the deal is fully integrated. There are some items that you integrate on HR side first thing within a week, but there's some benefits harmonization that takes you depend on the size and locations.
That's where, like, when do you define that, and how do you define that? Hey, our job as IMO is done. This business can run with it. We're out.
It's up to the team to define their definition of done. Team saying function, but we look at it as people, process, and platforms, right? Are people important? Are they within the reporting org structure? Processes. It's not always bringing to the buyer side. Sometimes you can adopt on the seller side as well, but is it one holistic way of doing, let's say, expense management? Is the process the same? Sometimes there is an interim approach that you adopt, and sometimes there is a target state right away. It's easy to do it. And the platforms, right? You don't want to use 3 communication channels. You don't want to use 2 expense management channel platforms. That's what the definition of done. Our recommendation is on the IMO side, but it is on the functional teams to say, yes, we've done this. Yes, we've done this. We feel like it's more business as usual, that as requests come in or flags are identified, we will continue to manage it.
So that defines sort of your scope and where you're involved, how long you'll be involved. Are there other key milestones and why is it always 90-day, 100-day?
It's easy to count. There's no specifics why 90, 100. It's just within a month.
Impression fatigue sets in and then nobody's going to want to do anything after.
Oh, that of course. Fatigue sits within a day of the close for sure, but it's usually easy milestones. There's teams who have their daily operations, but it's easy to go within a month of the deal, close within 2 months, 3 months. But some integrations take years. Some integrations are very easy to close within 2 months. It all depends on the partnership with the deal sponsor. What's the actual go-to-market strategy? And is it truly similar processes that you are integrating, or there is a transformation involved?
Integration, you got all these different departments. Everybody's working on how they're going to execute integration. How do you manage the governance, especially when you have work that's cross-functional?
The governance is usually established before close. You have the deal sponsor, the functional sponsors, and the functional leads that come in. And then it's a cadence. Usually fresh at the close, you have more periodic, whether it's a weekly or bi-weekly cadences. That's where you bring in the program level holistic view of what's happening, where people ask their questions to the functional level, right? And then there is governance on the functional side, where depending on the complexity of the deal, you set up IMO and functional team-specific weekly, bi-weekly cadences. That's where the things are actually happening. You track the overall progress on the how our integration activities happening. Sometimes, though, during those conversations, specific niche questions will come up. The dependencies are outlined. That's where you take in one-off meetings or if it needs to be escalated, right? Key component for the governance is the executive body, the steering committee, as what we had in most of the companies that I worked. That's the governing body, the decision maker. So usually the steering committee is not status reporting. It's a platform where you give program health, you identify risks or watch items, and you just any decisions that needs to be made.
Who's on the steering committee?
Usually it's the C-level and the
How
CEO.
often do you meet with the steering committee?
At the beginning of the deal close, it can be weekly, and then you move into bi-weekly or monthly, but usually bi-weekly is the best.
Okay. And it sounds like there's different levels of meetings happening. Like you can
Yes.
have more at the IMO level, then at the functional level. And then I'm assuming that you probably have like a kickoff meeting, probably like a diligence kickoff meeting. And then I don't know, is there like another meeting for integration kickoff?
Yes, of course. At the close, yeah.
Can you let's do the integration one. I feel like if diligence is pretty, a little more familiar with, but integration kickoff, what are the key things that you're covering? Like if you were to give me an outline of what that meeting looks like.
Why we are doing the deal. What's the company that we are bringing? It also depends if you're doing the first kickoff with the functional sponsors before close, so that's different. But assuming that you already closed and you are expanding the teams, that's a bit different as well because you have the exposure of outlining the company and all the details around it. But you bring in why. Why is very important for the functional leads. You bring in the introductory of who's the deal sponsor, who is the integration lead, and where to come if they have any questions. And you have an outline of the representatives from each function side. Functional sponsor, functional lead. But what's really important at the kickoff, who is going to be your partner on the seller side? It can be accounting to accounting or marketing to marketing, or it can be, as I said, in the founder-based companies, it's one person supporting all the 3 work streams. You have to know your receiver and a buyer side representatives. Key timelines and the integration strategy. What type of integration it is? When is the target to have the integration be done? So you have like a high-level timeline of the target is when you have first rebranded or integrated product release. Usually it's per the buyer side product release cycle, which you assume whether it's a quarterly or every 6 months, and then what's the realistic one? And then you start the kickoff sessions. You give opportunity for the functional teams to ask their questions, but the expectation is they are onboarded by their functional sponsors already. So that's the why and what we are doing. That is the most important at the kickoff.
Yeah, set the tone right and
Of
then
course.
lay out the key milestone goals.
Of course.
And then when you have these, like I guess, sort of progress update meetings or check-ins, what's the outline on those look like?
It's the driver after the kickoff. So part of the kickoff, what we do a readout of all the identified milestones or integration activities by the functional teams. So they take the accountability. Yes, we worked on this. This is our milestones that we identified. This is the dependencies. And then similar, the way we structured, coming back to the tool, sometimes it can be on the presentation level, sometimes it can be on the actual worksheet reporting, but key priorities, right? What are the key items that the cross-functional teams need to know in your roadblocks? Are we still on scope and schedule to do it? Usually 2 minutes update. And if there's any escalation needed, that's where IMO comes in. Can we handle it here? Does it need like executive approval? And we start to just bring up the roster and organize around that.
Is that similar with the steering committee meetings?
No. So steering committee, that we, as an appendix, we have the functional slides or reports. It's a visibility, but steering committee is very high level. The functional leads do not join the steering committee meetings. Is the deal sponsor, IMO leadership, and depend on the deal. Sometimes you can have the head of product, or maybe at the beginning stages, someone from the people side, from an HR organization, to just like show employee felt experience, how many touch points there's going to be. But no, it's not a readout.
Yeah, That's makes sense. You got a different audience. That's where we'll pause the conversation for now. We covered a lot of ground, and the next episode, we'll pick it up right where we left off and keep digging in. Thanks for listening. We'll see you in part 2.